Drew here, and I think that the premiere of season 3 of Servant is much better than last season's premiere. This is actually a pretty quick turnaround for a new season of a show. Lately, I've gotten accustomed to like 18-month gaps between seasons, so it was nice that this came back so quickly. And I felt that this episode, it really set up an interesting season. I like the premise of this season from the get-go. In the trailers, I thought, what an interesting new concept for the season. The show has always been about paranoia, but I think it's always been more or less about paranoia within the house. And now, finally, the Turners and Leanne, they finally have a relatively collegial relationship in raising Jericho. And now the threat is coming from outside the house, and the paranoia is at an all-time high. And I liked this episode. It was more of a Leanne-focused episode. Spoilers, by the way, you've been warned. It was more of a Leanne-focused episode. We didn't see as much of Sean and Dorothy and Julian, but I felt that it worked really well at capturing the feelings that you have when you're alone in a house and you keep questioning to yourself, did I do that, or is there someone in the house with me? I'm very imaginative. Maybe not everyone else does this, but whenever I've been alone in a house by myself, every little creak, every little rattle, every door that slams, everything that happens that just I can't explain, it freaks me out and my mind goes crazy. It goes roaming through all sorts of implausible possibilities. And the thing that makes this show work so well is from the beginning, the supernatural forces, or seemingly supernatural forces at work here, have operated right on the peripheral of what we can see. Like the things that happen that could be supernatural in origin always seem to happen off screen. Pretty much everything that we see on screen has an explanation in the real world that if you choose to, you could choose to see it as nothing more than a natural course of events. But, when it all comes together, you're like, no, there's something going on here. But the fact that the way that the supernatural forces have done, the mechanism for it has been in the natural world. It's been explainable things. It's not like we see fairies flying around, for example. It means that you're constantly watching the normal things that go on in everyday life for the Turners and Leanne and wondering, is that just a natural occurrence, or is there something more going on here? And this episode was more overtly horror than the show oftentimes is. My wife has no patience whatsoever for horror. She gets pretty scared easily and doesn't like gore. So it's been amazing to me that she's been able to watch this show as much as she has, especially since, neither of us does well with children in jeopardy due to our own kids. I feel like it's just too easy for us to imagine our kids in these situations and how frightening that would be as a parent. But the show has always been very restrained in its presentation, and I think that's kind of allowed us both to, just enjoy it for the atmosphere and for the characters, rather than to get too upset by the things going on. But this episode, I would say, was more overtly horror. There were a lot more jump scare setups than typical. And I feel like that could signal a new direction for this season, which I'm okay with. I thought that it was a pretty thrilling episode, actually. I know some people will just say it's boring, get to the point. But to me, the point was that so much of it was just normal goings-on in the house, but that there was this edge of, is someone out to get us? Are we safe? And to me, that makes it pretty interesting. Particularly, there were a couple sequences that really just scared me. And then when something actually did happen, when the seemingly burglar showed up, it was done so matter-of-factly, and just the escalating tension as Leanne tries to hide from him and then gets the upper hand and locks him in the closet. And the moment when she, starts talking to him and saying, hey, you don't have to just serve the cult. We can have our own lives. I was like, oh, Leanne, he's not with the cult. He's just a burglar. Because it seemed pretty obvious that was what was going on at first. But then when it came out at the end of the episode that her dagger had been taken, once again, I think this is the cleverness of the show, because my initial assumption that it was just a normal occurrence of a burglar, and that because Leanne is on edge, she thinks it's the cult, could be wrong, because he could literally be a member of the cult. Because why else would he have taken Leanne's dagger? But again, like the way that this show has always operated, it continues to operate on that level. And from that, I'm really amped for this season. I think it's going to be good. Other things that stood out to me this episode, I'm not exactly sure why they titled this episode Donkey. I know that there was the mural of Balaam's ass in the nursery that Leanne was pausing to look at during the course of the episode, but I felt like thematically it didn't really fit with the rest of the episode. I suppose that what they're going for is that Leanne is the donkey and she knows that there are supernatural forces at work and she's trying to protect the Turners from them, from the angel as it were, but she's being beaten by them for her troubles. I feel like that's the symbolism that they're probably going for, but I don't feel like that symbolism was that reflective of the episode as a whole. I feel like, obviously the Turners are insensitive to Leanne a lot of the time because they're all very narcissistic, but I feel like they were going out of their way to be better towards her than they typically have been, so I don't know that I got the beating of the donkey sense this episode. But let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. Otherwise, there's a really good little sequence at the end of this episode after the credits where they have M. Night Shyamalan, who directed this episode, just discussing the sequence where Leanne leaves the house. And it's interesting how the house is intentionally becoming oppressive to viewers because it's where everything happens. We may get glimpses of the outside world on the TV screen or, during FaceTime conversations, but nobody ever actually goes very far out of the house. And again, the outside world, though, this episode is shown to be equally oppressive in this, and the documentary at the end of this episode, I guess it's not really a documentary, but the behind-the-scenes footage that they show of them shooting this sequence and the thought that went into using the wide-angle lens to show just how difficult it is for Leanne to leave the house, and then the intentional amplification of these claustrophobic shots as they just cut in closer and closer to her face and distort her features. I thought that was really interesting just to hear the thought that went into this sequence, and I thought the sequence as a whole was really well done. So I really enjoyed this episode. I think it's setting up a humdinger of a season. I think that it's good that they found a new angle. The threat from outside is going to be more amplified this season. It's going to be the more serious threat than in previous seasons where they had other goals. So I'm glad that they've figured out ways to keep things fresh while still maintaining the same basic formula. But let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.